Hi everybody! Welcome to What Was the Boston Tea Party? The Boston Tea Party happened 250 years ago on December 16, 1773. It's such a big deal because it showed there was a hunger in America to break off from England and the king's rules far more than there was for the delicious taste of tea. But the whole event that was carried out by the Sons of Liberty was done with no one being attacked or hurt. There was no riot or mostly peaceful protest. The whole thing was peaceful. These actions to protect colonists' desired rights and to do it without harming anyone is why Americans look back at this event with pride and relief that these men stood up for what they believed in while putting themselves and their families at great risk. The Boston Tea Party is sandwiched evenly between the Boston Massacre in 1770, 3 years before the Tea Party, and 3 years before the War of Independence was declared in 1776. It is almost exactly 18 years before Americans of the United States of America would finally get their rights put into law in the Bill of Rights, which was passed on December 15, 1791, finishing what so many had fought so hard for, starting at the Boston Tea Party. But wait! You say you heard of a man being killed at the Tea Party and then rising from the dead. Doesn't that count as being heard? Let's find out more about that. Today in Boston, the intersection of Congress and Purchase Streets may be full of cars and pedestrians, but it looked far different over 250 years ago, before large amounts of land expansion filling in parts of the harbor. On December 16, 1773, it was a cool night when hundreds of men dressed as Mohawks or Narragansett Indians and wearing plenty of war paint made from soot to hide their faces, took to 3 commercial ships owned by the floundering British East India Company. Those 3 ships, the Eleanor, the Dartmouth, which must be better than a dartboard mouth, and the Beaver.
Gee, Wally.
These ships were filled with tea, not Texas tea, but tax tea. The worst kind of tea. Why would you need tax for tea anyway? It's not like you want to stick it on a wall. The Indian dress, however, was more about hiding their identities to prevent punishment than anything else, but it also sent a signal that they were siding with the Americans, not the British. The style of clothes was not actually true Indian, as they wore wool blankets, match coat style, carried hatchets or tomahawks and pistols, and used soot to paint their faces, and some donned other types of wear that would be recognized as Indian dress, but a lot of it was similar to what soldiers wore during the French and Indian War. The whole event would only take around 3 hours. Not bad considering they did it without the benefit of a caffeine rush. They started on the ships around 7 p.m. and were done near 10 p.m., according to eyewitnesses. It may have been a Thursday, but the men treated it like a Friday night on the town. Something to remember about those 3 ships. All of them were built in America and owned by Americans. It's true the cargo of tea they were carrying was from London and was owned by the British East India Company, but not the ships. Both the Beaver and the Dartmouth were constructed and owned by the Roches, a rich Nantucket Quaker family, whereas the Eleanor was owned by a wealthy Boston merchant named John Rowe. Yes, that does make the Eleanor an example of row, row, row your boat, and was just one of several of the Rowe vessels. Who were these hundreds of men who tossed the 342 chests of tea into the harbor? First off, most remained unknown for several years after the event, as secrecy was necessary to ensure safety. We do know of 116 that were actually documented to have participated in the dumping, but the rest remain undocumented, living in the shadows, hoping for sanctuary, for just a chance at a normal life, but are still a secret to this day. We do know that it was a group of all men from all stations of life, and while most were Bostonians, some were from other parts of the colony and even neighboring Maine. The largest group of them were of English blood, but there were Irish, Scots, Africans, and Portuguese involved as well. While the men differed in age, most of the documented were under 40, 9 were older than 40, while 16 were only teenagers. After the event, A great deal of them left Boston immediately to avoid being arrested. There were thousands who witnessed the Tea Party, and though few, if any, knew it, it was on those ships all of them began the long road to the American Revolution. What caused all these men to go through all this effort? By the 1760s, the debt in Britain had been building, and Parliament decided it could lower the burden by taxing the American colonists. The concept of printing money with nothing to back it up and getting their chicks for free would be centuries away. First, they implemented the Stamp Act in 1765, where nearly every piece of printed paper, from legal papers to playing cards, even newspapers and more, were hit with the tax. This was followed by the Townshend Acts in 1767, which taxed not just paper, but paint, lead, glass, and yes, tea. Britain reasoned that such taxes were in balance with money on fighting wars on the colonists' behalf. It was not a shared opinion by many colonists. Colonists demanded to be let into Parliament to be represented, but Britain was having none of that. This is where Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were both tea smugglers making profits off of avoiding the tax by smuggling, came in to create and promote the phrase taxation without representation, in order to win over fellow colonists in a way that would not only promote a stronger unified political force, but was also good enough for the pocketbooks of smugglers and regular colonists alike. It was also short enough they could have put it on a bumper sticker for the boats and carriages. The good news was the protests got most of the taxes removed. The bad news was Britain held tight to the tea tax, both in the colonies and in England. Britain was in no mood to let go of the income from colonists' 1.2 million pounds of tea consumed each year by the colonists. The colonists had a better chance of getting the tea out of the alphabet than out of the tax code. Boycotts were taken against the British East India Company, and smuggling Dutch tea became big business. Parliament had a plan for this too. In 1773, the Tea Act was passed, and now the British East India Company could sell tea duty-free, because no one wants duty mixed in with their tea. And this maneuver didn't stop John Hancock or Samuel Adams from increasing their smuggling, but it did put a crimp on their ability to compete in the market. The two pushed the idea of taxation without representation even harder on those around them. This type of propaganda had been going on since at least the Boston Massacre 3 years earlier. That event started on March 5, 1770. The colonists were in a fury over what they were told happened. This set the stage for the Tea Party and the march towards independence and revolution. There was another who for some time was thought to be killed by being hit in the head in the hold of a ship by a crate in motion. Instead, John Crane is reported to have been taken by others to a nearby carpenter shop and buried under wood shavings. No wonder you have to watch your step when the chips are down. When he woke up, he fled to safety. He was the only person in the entire event that was harmed, and it was an accident by other patriots. And even more alarming was how the Sons of Liberty and crew swept the decks of the ships and made certain any disturbed items were placed back where they were before the boarding of the ships. The 3 ships' crews all swore that no damage had been taken on the vessels except to the crates of tea. And that's how and why the Tea Party got started and how a dead man came back to life. If you would like to learn the 10 things you didn't know about the Boston Tea Party, look for the full video with all 10 things revealed here on Timescape Imageworks channel. Thank you for sharing your time to watch.